Hi, my name is Josh Fidel, and this is my presentation for communication strategies for digital transformation. Today, I want to talk about what actually happens inside an organization when its technology division stops communicating. And I will be using MasterCard's transformation story to ground the conversation in a real-world example. Here's what we will cover. I'll walk through three specific impacts that can result when a technology division fails to communicate openly with the rest of the organization. After that, I will look at an example of effective communication drawn from the MasterCard case study, and I will close with the key takeaways I think matter most. The company I'm using throughout this presentation is MasterCard, specifically the period between 2010 and 2017, when their CEO led the company through a significant strategic and organizational transformation. The first and probably most consequential impact of poor communication from the technology division is strategic misalignment. When tech operates in isolation, the plans it is executing do not match where the rest of the organization is trying to go. Leadership ends up making decisions without understanding what is technically possible or what is already in development. This tends to play out in a few predictable ways. Executives invest in initiatives the tech team cannot realistically support. Business units design product roadmaps that conflict with systems already being built. And when something finally ships, it does not match what the market needed because no one aligned early enough to catch the gap. The MasterCard case actually touches on this indirectly. Before Banga arrived, the CEO was spending millions on advertising campaigns to steal the market share from Visa, while 85% of global payments were still being made in cash. That kind of strategic misfire does not happen in a vacuum. It happens when strategy is set by one group and execution runs through another, with little coordination between them. Banga's first move was not a technology decision, it was a communication decision. He changed what problem the whole company understood itself to be solving. The second impact is that silo technology teams quietly eliminate the conditions that produce real innovation. The most valuable opportunities tend to live at the intersection of what is technically possible and what is actually needed by the market or by partners. When tech teams do not share what they are working on, those intersections never get discovered. The MasterCard case makes this concrete. Their adaptive ecosystem strategy, where they partnered with companies like Transport for London, Maytag, General Motors, and Gilead Sciences, only worked because information moved across boundaries. When MasterCard helped digitize London's transit payment system, they did not just solve a payments problem. They unlocked anonymized transit data that had the potential to reshape how a city manages peak hour demand. That insight only surfaced because teams were actually talking to each other and to outside partners about what was being built. When a tech division does not share plans or updates, the organization loses the peripheral vision that makes those kinds of breakthroughs possible. Projects that get built in parallel with no one realizing they could solve each other's problems or that a combination of two efforts might be more valuable than either one alone. The third impact is trust, and this one tends to be underestimated until the damage is already visible. When a technology division does not communicate, the rest of the organization fills the silence with assumptions, and usually negative ones. Teams begin working around tech rather than with it. Leaders stop bringing the tech function into early conversations because they have learned to expect delays or no useful response at all. Over time, the cultural divide between technology and the rest of the business becomes structural. It stops being a communication problem and starts being an identity problem. Banga confronted this exact dynamic when he arrived at MasterCard. He found a company with a complacent culture where people would casually mention having passed on a deal not out of any strategic logic, but simply out of low ambition and disengagement. That kind of attitude does not appear overnight. It builds over years when people are not brought into decisions, do not have clear direction, and do not feel like their work is connected to anything larger. Communication failure at the top eventually becomes morale failure across the organization. For the communication example, I want to highlight something from the MasterCard case that I thought was the most instructive. When Banga reframed MasterCard's competitive landscape from Visa to cash, that was not just a strategic pivot, it was a deliberate communication act. He gave everyone in the organization a single, clear answer to the question, what are we actually here to do? That kind of clarity is rarer than it sounds, and it had real downstream effects on how teams prioritized which partnerships they pursued, and what kinds of ideas made it through the innovation funnel. But I think what is even more interesting is how the lab's structure was designed with communication built in. Portfolio managers sat between the labs and business units to translate ideas across functions. Regional innovation leads made sure the innovation funnel was getting input from the field and from customers, not just from headquarters. The Idea Box program gave any employee a visible, structured pathway to surface an idea and have it heard by leadership. What MasterCard got right is that it treated communication as organizational infrastructure, not a nice to have. Innovation did not happen despite the structure, it happened because of it. The technology function was never allowed to become a black box, and that made all the difference. So, to close, here's what I take away from all of this. First, when technology does not communicate, strategy and execution drift apart quickly, and it usually takes a visible failure to bring them back in line. Second, the best innovation opportunities are cross-functional by nature and only get found when teams actively share what they are working on. Third, trust is slow to build and fast to lose. Once the rest of the organization stops expecting useful information from the technology division, that expectation is hard to reverse. MasterCard is a useful reminder that communication is not a soft skill, it is an organizational capability. Benga did not just change strategy, he changed how information moved through the company. And that, more than any individual initiative, is what drove the transformation. Thank you.